Good morning, students, and welcome to another edition of Out and About with Mr. Versillo. This morning, Friday, September 25th at 7:30 a.m., we are here at the Eugene B. Fargeorge Nature Preserve here at Quinnipiac Meadows, and it is cared for by the New Haven Land Trust. When we hear that word trust, in certain cases, it means places where things are put so that they can be cared for. For some strange reason, my iPhone was dead this morning, so I'm using my iPad. Not what I wanted to do, but I think it'll work for you. What we're gonna do is we're gonna head this way through the park entrance. We're gonna be about maybe a 5-minute walk with the dogs, and then I'm gonna take you out to the point, and we're gonna look at some things on in the nature preserve and on the Quinnipiac River. And I'll try to connect it both to what we're studying in 7th grade, which is our 5 themes of geography, and of course 1765, our starting point with our colonial history of the United States for the 8th grade. At this time, I'm gonna unleash the hounds, Ajax and Sebastian, and we're gonna go for a little walk. And this is gonna be bumpy, so put on your seatbelts and let's go for a ride. Stay? Okay, good, stay. Okay, Ajax, come. Ajax, come. Okay, grab the leash. Okay. We're going in. The pedestrian entrance is just here. They keep it pretty small so that motorcycles and ATV vehicles can't get through. So we're heading down this trail, and you can see it ahead of us. Right here, this building, it's not really a house. As you can see behind it, it's what's called a false house. And what they do is this really houses stuff for the water company and sewage drainage. So it's a worker's house, and that's at the beginning. So this trail is used for a couple things. One, it's used as a service road for public utilities to store things here. And also, it's used as a maintenance road for the train, which you'll see we're going to come up on the Amtrak train tracks when we get a little closer up here. So you may see one of the Excella speed trains go through. If you ever see one of those Excella Amtrak trains, they look like a high-speed train. It was a failed project by the U.S. government. They paid a lot of money to put in this specialized track. Normally, when you see train tracks, it's steel and wood ties that go in between the steel tracks. But the Excella, because its ability to go so fast, needed concrete ties. And they paid all the money to put it in. And it's our first view of the marsh. And they paid all the money to put in this specialized track. And then the train was never able to travel at the speeds that it was intended because there was too many areas going through the city where it had to slow down. So it never achieved its full potential. Okay, if we go straight on this road, we'll go back to where the utilities store. You can see right here where the high tension wires are, and you can see the stone where the train tracks are. Here comes Ajax. Ajax, let's go. Come on. We gotta go. Good boy. So Sebastian, my guy with all the training collars on, he is not even 2 years old. He's a true puppy. And Ajax, my slow guy, poking around, he's almost 12 years old. So here we see Quinnipiac Meadows Nature Preserve by the New Haven Land Trust. There's a welcome where you can sign in, some granite benches, and we can go immediately here to the welcome to the preserve. I just want to read this for my 8th graders. John Davenport. John Davenport, who owned the land that is now the Quinnipiac Meadows Nature Preserve, was an English Puritan minister who helped co-found New Haven Colony in 1638, alongside Theophilus Eaton. So 8th grade, remember 1638, John Davenport and Theophilus Eaton founded New Haven. That's much, much further before 1765 when we're talking about the Stamp Act. The history of this site. Around 1640, Reverend John Davenport, who is pictured here, one of the founders of New Haven Colony, received this land as part of a 600-acre land grant. The Davenport property was farmed for the next 100 years and became known as the Davenport Farm. Rumor has it that there is a stone near the preserve with Davenport's name on it that was used to mark the boundary of his farm. The next time that we film, I'm going to show you this stone. There's a man in my neighborhood who's 90 years old who knows where it is. When this land was owned by Davenport, all of the land you see here was salt marsh. However, since the 1930s, much has it been filled in to allow for construction of a water main and the highway, Interstate 91. So for 7th grade, we know that that is an example of humans modifying the natural environment. In order for us to build highways and other structures, that we have had to fill in the salt marsh. There's two ways that you can go here. You can go the meadow walk and you can go the river walk. I think we'll go the meadow walk today because I want to show you some Native American things. Come on, boys. So we're walking down the trail here, and this is a great marked nature preserve. There's signs that talk about the vegetation, that talk about the history, and talk about the animals, mostly aquatic birds like the osprey. So we're going to come up and I'll show you. I'm sure we're going to see some osprey this morning. I'm going to show you a nest right now, and I'm going to show you the sign. So there is a photograph of the osprey. It is a predator bird. You can see by its talons and its beak that are made for ripping things open. The ospreys almost exclusively eat fish. On the top of that pole right there is an osprey nest. Sometimes you could see a baby osprey sticking his head up, waiting for his mother and father. The mother and father certainly aren't in that nest right now. They're already well aware that me, Ajax, and Sebastian are about. So if you listen, you may hear a very high-pitched squealing sound. That's the sound that the osprey makes as it warns other birds that we, me and the dogs, are in the area. Maybe he even knows that you guys are virtually here too. So we're walking. You can see that there's a mist on everything. The morning dew. The morning dew is very important for our ecosystems. It's this dew that plants and animals use for water when it doesn't rain. The reason we get the dew is because of temperature differences between morning and night. Have you ever noticed when you look out on a car or you look at things in the morning that it's covered with a thin mist? So I want to talk to you about these things right here. Have you ever saw these before? I'm sure you have. They're all along the boulevard. These are called frag, F-R-A-G, mites, M-I-T-E-S. And you can see them. You probably call them swamp grasses. And most people do. Here you can see a better look at them. They're a little wet right now, so they're not fluffy. Right here it's showing all of the birds that can be found here in the nature preserve, including this big woodpecker. So back to the phragmites. The phragmites that you see everywhere are not native native meaning from here, are not native to our country. These Phragmites were brought over from North Africa, probably in the region of the Nile River. And when they got here, they loved the climate of the United States, especially our watery areas, and they thrived. But when something comes in and takes over, it's not always a good thing. So I'm going to show you, when we get out here to the marsh, what natural grasses look like, meaning that they were supposed to be here, versus species that have taken over. The way that we call species that have taken over is called, based on the word invade, like invaders, it is called an invasive species. Okay, at this time, we're at one of the viewing stations here in the park. I'm going to flip you around, and you're going to see both natural and human history. So, in terms of our themes of geography, we're going to see natural characteristics, and we're going to see human characteristics. And here goes one of the osprey. Let's see if he's coming our way. It's a beautiful morning. You can see by the long shadows that the sun is rising in the east, and the sun is very low in the sky. No matter who you are, when we first view a place, we want to understand where we are. That's a natural human characteristic. I think that people never want to feel like they're lost. So let's try to get our bearings. So let's start here. We see we have the highest point in New Haven, which is East Rock. Notice the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, which is illuminated at night, and it is the highest point in New Haven. Just below it, you see a bridge. The bridge has heavy trucks and cars going over it at great speed. This, we can predict, is a highway, because we notice that the cars are not stopping. The highway speeds are 55 to 65, sometimes 80 miles an hour. That is Interstate 91. It starts in New Haven and goes all the way up close to Canada. Underneath that bridge is the beginning of the Quinnipiac River, when it starts to become quite narrow. On the other side of the bridge is what we call the upper Quinnipiac River, and you can see that it's much wider. In front of us, you can perhaps understand that this grass in front of us is different from the swamp Phragmites I've already talked about. That in front of us is natural, what we call indigenous. Indigenous means it grew up here and it belongs here. Those indigenous grasses right there are called eelgrass. Eelgrass. And that's what we want. This right here is invasive. It's an invader. It came here and it took over. And obviously when it took over, it took a lot of the homeland from what would be the eelgrasses. If you look on the other side of the river onto Fairhaven, you can see that the houses and the buildings are built so close to the water that actually man had to construct retaining walls. Can you see that? Those walls? And what that did is that closes in the river. When we close in rivers, then we don't leave them any room to flood. So what we're standing at here in the park is something that is left natural. This is called a floodplain, a floodplain. And this was Mother Nature's way of leaving an area so when the river gets very high, it has these grasses to go in and filter out the river waters and give the animals a place to hide and to eat. As man modifies the environment, we have filled in the marshes. This is also called a salt marsh. And this natural floodplain or salt marsh has been filled in by dirt. Usually the dirt comes from when we build houses. Remember, when humans build homes or build roads, they have to excavate. They dig. And when we dig, we need something to do with that excess dirt. So what happens is it fills in. If you remember the sign, that sign said that the Davenport farm was all salt marsh like this, and it was 600 acres. I can tell you this, people. This small bit of marsh right here is not even close. I would bet that it's only about 10 acres. So you can imagine that this salt marsh extended as far as the eye could see, and past that, where that highway is and where that bridge is and where the railroad tracks is, it was all salt marsh at one time, filled with animals. That brings us to my next point. Please notice that directly across the salt marsh, there's a small island of trees. Can you see that? What is that? Well, I can tell you that you may not know it, and I didn't know it until I started studying about it, but this is called Grannis Island. And Grannis Island was the summer home to the most important people of New Haven. And it's not us. It is the summer home of the Quinnipiac Native American tribe. This right here that we're looking at is the historic home of the Quinnipiac Native Americans. And before there was a single white house or a motorboat or a bridge or a road or a wall or high-powered lines or monuments up there on East Rock, if you have the ability to imagine this whole place with only trees and only water and only grasses and animals, this was what the Quinnipiac called home. In this island right here, Grannis Island, here is an aerial view of it. That's what it looks like from an airplane. See it right there? And this is the salt marshes. And this is where we're standing right here. This is Bella Vista up in the background. And this is Quinnipiac Avenue back here. This right here, this building right here, This is Walmart. Okay? So this right here is what is left of the Davenport farm, but in its all those years back in the 1640s, everywhere you see here would have all looked like this. What it says here is that in spring, there are special tides that have to do with the gravitational forces of the moon and the sun. Miss Baxter can talk to you about this. But what it does is the moon's gravitational pull pulls the water of Earth so that it's higher in some places and lower in others. Okay? So in these special tides, that island is able to be walked to without a boat. But when the tide is high, it's a true island and you can't get to it walking. So what Peabody Museum and Yale University did is they excavated this island. See this? And they excavated the point right there, at the point right there. And what they found was this. They found post mold, clay deposit, they found a trash heap, they found a stone-lined fireplace, they found a plain fireplace without stone, they found a disturbed hearth, another place to cook, and they found a shell heap. What this shows is that people have been using this space for 4,000 years. 4,000 years. So we know that it said in the beginning that John Davenport in New Haven was founded in 1637. So that's only 400 years ago or so, right? But what this is saying is that the Quinnipiac Native Americans and their ancestors have been using Grannis Island as a summer, basically like a post, like a summer fort, so that they could live well off the land, off these productive salt marshes where there's so many animals for thousands of years. So the reasons the Native Americans would come here is they could enjoy the abundant seasonal seafood harvest and the hunting opportunities. The archaeologists also found remains of dogs that had been buried, lying on their sides and surrounded by artifacts. Dogs lying on their side, surrounded by artifacts. That sounds like that they were purposely celebrated and buried and honored by the Native Americans. This suggested a ritual practice. Researchers believe that the dogs were considered part of the community that helped with guarding the tribe and hunting. Dogs were spiritually important to many tribes. What do you think the dogs had to the Quinnipiac? What do you think that the dogs did on that island? And more importantly, what do you think their spiritual significance was to the Native American tribe? Did they see some kind of a sacred or a holy spirit in them? Do you think that sometimes they believed that their dog companions had traits or characteristics that reminded them of their relatives who had passed? What other spiritual characteristics do you think that these ancient people saw in their dogs? So much so that they gave them a very special burial. So, when Europeans came here, they saw that the Quinnipiac Native Americans were onto something. They were no dummies. And they saw that this land here was lush with all different kinds of resources. Shellfish, animals, and most importantly to early history was furs. This entire area was populated with a type of furry animal that is related to the otter and other like otters and other animals, weasels, etc., that are much desired mink for their furs. And it was called, or is called, the muskrat. The muskrat. And so the muskrat was very prevalent in all of these salt marshes, and they were hunted almost to the point of extinction. In fact, they were hunted and killed at such a level that there are no more muskrats in this area. They're very difficult to find. But at the time, back in Europe, it was all the rage and all the fancy thing to have fur robes and fur clothing. And this was brought back and traded for earlier times and used as a form of money. So let's finish with this. I'm going to take my vest off. The sun has come up, and you're being good boys. You're at daddy boys. Well, I can't sit down. It's got all that morning dew on it. Come here, B. Okay. So. Okay. Okay. Adex, B. Come here. Sit with Daddy. Sit. 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 Come on. Sit. Good boy. All right. So, I think we covered a lot of ground this morning, and we looked at some stuff. I thought it would be a cool thing to do on Friday. I wanted to say that I was very impressed with the way that everyone has worked this week, and I especially wanted to give a shout out to some of my 8th graders that have done a great job in showing up, and Javon and Lenny and Juliana and Janaisha, and so all of the 7th graders, especially my students that are really working on their English skills. You've shown just an incredible work ethic. 7th grade, make sure that you hand in your 5 theme of geography assignment, and in 8th grade you have a I was fascinated with when you all said that Benjamin Franklin, yeah, we know him, he's the guy that flew the kite with the key, and he was so much more than just the guy that experimented with electricity. He is the first American, in that he invented the way that people think that they can do anything in America. He was completely self-made, and he became very, not just wealthy, but influential in the establishment of America. And he was always anti-slavery, and he had a lot of core beliefs in goodness that we should all be aware of. I hope you enjoyed our Out and About with Mr. V this morning. We're here at the we're at Eugene Farr George Preserve here at Quinnipiac Meadows. So, our 5 themes of geography. Movement. We know that movement, people here would have moved using boat, or they would have been walking. We also see that humans move here through the highway that was built. And we saw that the birds were flying, and that's a type of movement too. So we have movement in this place. Region. We know that Quinnipiac Meadows is a part of New Haven. So it is New Haven itself. This is one small area in a larger region. And New Haven is in the larger region of New Haven County. And New Haven is in a larger region of Connecticut. And Connecticut is an even larger region of New England. Mr. Help H. E. Human environment interaction. We clearly saw that they couldn't move the river, so humans had to build a bridge over the river. So they adapted to their environment in that they built a bridge over the river, but they modified the environment when we built that bridge and put in the highway. You can see that the rivers here, it's something that we want. We adapt to the river, we need the river, but we filled in all the banks of the river with dirt so that we could get to the river. So there's humans in the environment. We've affected one another. We've interacted. Mr. Help L, location. The exact location of New Haven is this. That's the exact location. New Haven is at 41.3083 degrees north by 76.9279 degrees west. If we were to put that grid, that tile grid, that grid just like my shirt across all of Earth, this is the exact coordinates of New Haven. Now, our relative location is pretty easy. Hey, I'm at Walmart. You go up to Walmart, you're gonna see a gas station, Shell station, and you see Taco Bell. You hang it right at Taco Bell. After you go underneath the railroad bridge, I'm about, like a quarter of a block, and you'll see the entrance to the park. Easy, right? Relative location. It's the way that we use other places to describe where we are. And lastly, place. Place is easy. Place is looking at around us and seeing all the natural and the human characteristics that make up this place. And we've gone that. We have salt marshes, we have roads, we have a large cliff up there, that's East Rock. We have in the distance, you can see it right there. That is the newly painted Grand Avenue Bridge. So there are lots of both human and natural characteristics that make up this nature preserve. Have a great weekend. You have Monday off for the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, which is a Day of Atonement, which is the day that Jews mourn the losses that they've had in the way that they celebrate the people that are gone. So at this time, this is Mr. Versillo for Ajax and Sebastian, signing off and saying, have a great day. And remember, if you're not moving forward, you're standing still.